Hi there, this is Alex Mitchell, the Career Counselor for Agents of Change Social Work Test Prep. Today we're talking about the different career options for licensed social workers. So you might be thinking, what career options do I have with a BSW, LMSW, or LCSW license? Today we're going to answer that question and talk a little bit about the differences between these licensure levels. So first, just at the most basic level, in most states, you will need to become licensed at a certain degree level so that you can practice in specific settings. You may notice in work that calls for clinical facing roles, you'll need higher levels of licensure in your state. At a minimum, also most boards will require that social workers have some form of education and training from an accredited program. So make sure as you're looking at the different programs for a associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's level program, that it has been accredited by the Council on Social Work Education, the CSWE. That's very important because, again, most licensure boards require that. One great thing about social work careers is that the field is growing. According to the Bureau for Labor Statistics, social work employment overall is predicted to grow by 13% over the next 10 years. That's faster than the average growth rate for other occupations. So it's a very fast growing career. And as you look at specific parts of social work, you find that it's growing even quicker. So healthcare, for example, is growing at 14%, that part of social work. And then substance use disorder social work is growing the fastest, along with mental health social work at about 17% over the next few years. So it's a very fast growing career, especially in some of these subsegments, and one that's expected to continue to grow fast for the next decade or so. Before we jump into the different careers available at the different levels of licensure, we wanted to provide a little bit of clarification. You may notice different licensure acronyms in different states. So you'll notice here many different combinations of letters for the associates and bachelor's level, the master's level, and the clinical level. So make sure that you look at these different designations that are called out in job listings, make sure it's clear, and you can follow up and ask questions if it's not clear, is this a master's level position, or is master's level licensure required, or is clinical licensure required? So just wanted to call this out because it does vary state to state. So if you move, you may notice a different acronym than you first saw in the state you got licensed in. So pay attention to that as you're looking at different careers. So starting with associate degree. So the associate degree in social work, or oftenly called the ASW program, is typically a 2-year course of study. This is covering the basics of social work, how social work came to be, what social workers do generally, and some of their career paths. And so, ASWs are often used by folks to decide, is this a good fit for me? It's a 2-year commitment instead of a longer commitment of a bachelor's degree. And then it gives you the opportunity to often transition into a bachelor's program after those 2 years if you decide that you want to pursue further education. So it's often a stepping stone for many folks. But with this associate's degree, you still can practice in several roles as a social worker. So some of the more common ones that can be pursued with just this associate's degree are patient advocates or intake coordinators. Often there are many assistant roles to higher level licensed social workers, like a counselor assistant or a case manager, where you can work with other social workers who are licensed at a higher level. So again, it can give you that exposure to many different positions out there, but you're able to kind of jump into it quicker. You only need that 2-year degree, and you're able to experience many different fields here, often in kind of an assistant role, again, with a licensed social worker at a higher level, typically. At the bachelor's level, this is typically a 4-year degree, a bachelor's of social work. But if you come in with that ASW, that associate's degree, sometimes it may only require 2 years. So again, that associate's degree can be that first step. Sometimes people follow that up directly with a bachelor's degree. So in a bachelor's program, you're going to get some general education courses. You're going to talk about sociology, psychology, cultural diversity, human behavior. So you're going to have a wider range of topics that you cover than that associate's degree. Similar to the associate's degree being a path to a bachelor's degree, Many folks find the bachelor's degree is a path to them moving to their master's degree in the future. So, there's typically some folks move directly from a bachelor's degree to a master's program. Sometimes people do a few years of work and then apply for master's programs, but many do take that path to move up to that next level after the bachelor's degree. The bachelor's degree opens up some more opportunity career-wise than that associate's degree does. So you'll notice here, some things like residential counselors, program associates, so kind of working and managing programs at a more junior level, sometimes community outreach workers or human services specialists, case managers, which is a very general term, but you can be a case manager in many different fields with that bachelor's of social work degree and license. So it starts to open up your opportunities a bit more broadly than that associate's degree is. Again, that associate's degree, you're working kind of as an assistant many times. Bachelor starts to open it up a little bit more for you at that licensure level. Moving up to master's. So again, we've kind of walked through the associates, we've talked through the bachelor's being that 4-year degree. A master's of social work can take on average about 2.5 years for most folks to complete, in addition to those 4 years of the bachelor's degree. This really depends on how quick you take classes. So if you really move quick and you take an accelerated program, you maybe go full-time, you aren't working while you're doing that master's degree, sometimes you can complete it in 1 year to 2 years, but that's a very accelerated path. Most folks, 2 years, 2.5 years is pretty common. The difference between a master's degree and the bachelor's degree is that the master's programs typically focus a bit more. You may still have some kind of general classes you have to take, but you'll start to specialize more, things that are relevant to your career. Again, as I mentioned before, many people take time between their bachelor's degree and master's, and they may specialize. They may go into geriatric care. They may go into school social work. And so the master's programs typically allow them to take electives that focus more on that career and kind of level up their experience, give them some skills that they can bring back to those specific concentrations that they have. And in terms of specific areas that masters of social work, degree holders and licensure holders can practice, it starts to broaden. So of course, there are many different fields that they can practice in, ranging from healthcare to children to community. But this is where you start to see social workers be able to work in the macro environment. So they might be doing, kind of global social work, looking at, kind of social work from a global perspective, an international perspective. They might be looking at management roles and leadership inside of nonprofits, for example, or in other agencies. They're starting to take on those more elevated roles, operate at a larger macro level. They might also start to move into counseling. They might be doing kind of direct, one-on-one counseling in, this kind of master's level under the supervision of a licensed clinical social worker. So you start to see, not only further broadening that we saw from associates to bachelor, but now we see kind of operating at a different level, a more policy level sometimes, a more macro level, focused on kind of bigger, broader issues instead of just individual support. So that's one of the big changes you start to unlock as you get that master's degree and that master's level of licensure. And finally, moving on to kind of licensed clinical careers. So licensed clinical social workers really can work in almost any field once they have that clinical license at the highest level of independence. So that's the big difference, is when you become that licensed clinical social worker, you're able to operate very independently. And that comes with a lot of responsibility, of course, but you have that kind of opportunity to operate at that level. Interestingly, too, right as I mentioned supervision before, you can, of course, serve as a supervisor. You may hire, train, evaluate, mentor staff. You may be mentoring folks with their master's level of licensure, bachelor's level of licensure. They could be under you. You're responsible for them and their behavior. So the responsibility gets much higher with the licensed clinical careers, but the opportunity is also bigger. So you're able to operate at a higher level. You're able to operate in any field, really, and work with any type of clients. And so some specific careers, one of the biggest changes is you could have your own private practice as a licensed clinical social worker. So if that's something that appeals to you, set your path and kind of find your way and kind of make your steps to get there through your bachelor's program, through your master's program, through the licensure at those levels, at the clinical level, really to unlock this opportunity to own your own private practice if that's motivating. Again, to hire other social workers in that practice, to supervise them. These are things that are really only possible when you have that clinical level of licensure. You also have opportunities, of course, to do more intense counseling, whether that's group or one-on-one supervision in different ways, whether that's field placement supervision or clinical supervision, as we already mentioned. And of course, you can see on the slide here, there's many different fields of social work that you could practice in as a clinical social worker. But again, the major difference here is you're able to supervise, you're able to operate at that higher level of independence and be responsible for other social workers. Finally, I did say the clinical level was the highest, but sometimes we get questions about PhDs or doctors of social work, DSWs. And so some clinicians choose to go even further. After they've gotten that clinical license, they choose to continue to get their PhD or DSW degree. Often they want to go deeper into research or understand a macro area much deeper and become an expert there, a doctor in that area. So they really want to specialize. They maybe want to speak at conferences. They want to teach others at universities. And so, these are not licensure levels. These are just schooling programs. And so if you are interested in a PhD or a DSW degree, I encourage you to really look at the focus of the colleges you are looking at. They're not all created equal. Some are very research focused. Some are more kind of application focused. Sometimes they have different coursework that you have to take or different levels of engagement with your co-students. So make sure you find the program that's right for you. Again, you're not kind of just pursuing this degree, this PhD or this DSW, just for licensure, because there is no licensure. You're really doing it to become an expert in the field that you are very interested in. You're doing it very much for you. So you want to make sure that that program is a strong match for how you learn, a strong match for what you want to learn, and maybe even the types of people in your professional network that you want to work with, that you want to get to spend time with. It's a great degree for building those strong networking connections as well. So that's just a little bit on PhD and DSW, but again, no licensure level there. The master's is the terminal degree, and the clinical license is your terminal license currently. So obviously we talked a lot about careers today, but licensure, of course, involves taking some ASWB exams. And so if you are looking for study content, you can definitely find it on our YouTube channel. We also have a podcast. If you just search for Agents of Change, you'll find a lot of great content there to help you prepare. And if you want even more materials, practice exams, study groups, check out our paid study materials at agentsofchangeprep.com. We have materials for the bachelor's, master's, and clinical exams. So I encourage you to check out those materials. They all also have a free preview, so you can check that out as well without having to put any money down. So please do check that out if you're considering your licensure. And thank you. We enjoyed sharing this topic with you today.